Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gifted Creative Podcast. I'm Lillian Skinner. If you've listened to me before, you'll notice I changed my podcast name. It is now about creative intelligence. What would prompt me to change my podcast name? I'm sure you can guess there are many, many reasons, but I actually always intended to do this. I knew that I was going to be transitioning from neurodivergence to creativity because I don't see a difference between the two. And I also gave myself the title of creative intelligence researcher 5 years ago when I started doing that. So, yes, I expected to make this change, and it has aligned with what I expected in the world. We now need creative intelligence more than ever, and I'm not really sure people even know what it is, because Cartesian dualism pretty much erased it. As a researcher for the last 5 years, I've been working on how that happened, and also to understand how creative intelligence fits into the future. I used to work in emerging tech. I did IT security, risk management, and I kept seeing my intelligence laid out in the hardware and software I was working with. And I found that fascinating. So I tried to go into cognitive science and social sciences, where I was pretty much thrown out immediately because they're not interested in people who don't believe in Cartesian dualism. Surprise, surprise. And I knew that I had to go in this direction because IT would never reach singularity because the creatives had it. And creatives are not able to put down their full intelligence to a machine. That's just not possible. But that's exactly what they expect us to do. So I pivoted to this. I grew up in a family that is about as creative as we can get. We are savants, and I think many more creatives are savants than they realize because our 2D systems oppress what savantism is quite profoundly. Most people in this world don't see whole picture. Creatives do. Most people only see and can articulate the small picture. Some can feel the large picture, the other half, but very few are capable of seeing, feeling, and articulating the whole picture because we are only cultivated in cognitive intelligence in our systems. That's how we can replace it with AI because we have been limited to that. But that doesn't mean we don't have that greater intelligence. And I could try to reach everyone with this, but I will fail. I think that most people are so far away from their native holistic intelligence that they're not going to understand what I'm saying. And in past history, those people have been persecuted. So I'm just reaching out to those closest to me because they are the ones who are going to be interested in this. We don't have a choice but to go this way. If we try to go the other way, it nearly kills us, or it does. That limitation is there because we are only focusing on the small picture. Our systems don't value people who are integrated in somatic and cognitive intelligence, which means they don't get a place in our system. We have to slot into what they have valued, and what they have valued is only small picture. And it's not actually creation, it's dissection. It's destruction. It's deviation. It's anything they can to make it smaller and divide it, which isn't true growth. And now we actually need real, authentic growth and to stop focusing on division and dissection. Because our systems don't value people with somatic and cognitive integration, we don't have a place. So my family has struggled because of that. We're meant to do something very specific. My father's a music savant, but he ended up being a paramedic. My sister's a music savant, but she ended up being a poet. I'm an emotion savant, and I ended up working in technology. And I had aunts and uncles and grandparents that all ended up in a space that was completely the opposite of what their talent was naturally in. I think many creatives know this. It's like we are kind of beyond what the system talent is for the space, and so we can't actually go into it, which is horrible. It's a shame, and we right now need genius, and they have a system that limits that. The creatives keep their internal modeling, and our system doesn't allow that. It won't allow us to use that. It keeps us externalizing everything. But I know how it works, and this is the research I am sharing on this podcast and in real life with the people I work with. I know they would really like me to lay it down in AI, but I'm confused why I would do that. That would be replacing myself with a machine, and that would just be stupid. Also, I don't think it's actually possible. I think the most reasonable thing, probably the only thing we can and should do, is actually use AI to enhance our intelligence, not diminish it, not replace it, but enhance it. Almost all the science on our creative intelligence is for those who have been fractured, who have split their intelligence apart, those who are not really truly creative. We don't have creative intelligence science because of Cartesian dualism, because they split our intelligence somatic from cognitive. But creative intelligence is born when you merge the two, when your emotions work for you. You'll notice in our science, there's little parts and pieces of this. The neuroscience is definitely contributing to that picture now, but there's no one that's making it whole, no one that's making it make sense. So I've decided to be that person because my intelligence lays in this space. It goes across the whole, and I know what it looks like. I've already laid down taxonomies for how we learn, think, and grow in our somatic and our creative intelligence that line with the ones that are already laid out for cognitive. I have written much of the science on how creatives move through the world because creatives are different. You will notice I use a lot of story in this podcast because story is important. Story is holistic. Story allows me to tell you how the past and the present and the future come together. So I will use story on a lot of these podcasts in addition to doing some interviews. So let's get to our story. It's a story written by Aesop, also many times heard as one of Aesop's fables. Aesop was a slave in a collapsing empire. He was owned by the people he's warning you against in this particular story. And for 2,500 years, this fable has survived because it encoded something really important, but that's hidden in plain sight. We know this story as the city mouse and the country mouse. History has mutilated this story to its simplicity, but I've read so many versions that I think I put them all together until this is how I saw it. A city mouse went to visit his cousin in the country. When he arrived, he shared a meal with his cousin and was pretty unimpressed by the plain foods, the grains, roots, and dried berries. He walked the land and was pretty bored by the scenery and how little was happening. The city mouse asked his cousin, "Why do you live here? Why would you live such a hard, quiet, lonely life? Don't you want more?" The country mouse thought, "I don't know. This seems fine to me." The city mouse said, "No, this is so much better in the city. There's more food, there's more happening. It's so much better." The country mouse was curious, so they traveled back to the city together. When they arrived, the country mouse was overwhelmed at first, but once in the grand house, he saw a table of cheese, cakes, fruits, and fine meats, and he was all in. He was amazed. Just as they were about to feast, they heard a loud noise. The door burst open, a cook and a dog rushed in, and the mice had to run for their lives. When they reached safety, the country mouse said, "I think I'm going to go home. I've had enough. You might have luxuries here, but I have a simple life without fear." And he returned home, ate his food, and lived a long life. In this story, you could say the city mouse are the people who live in the cities, and that's obvious. But the country mouse is actually the person who is creative, who is whole, who has maintained his full cognitive architecture, because living in cities is like living in low-grade trauma. The only people who do okay in POW games are psychopaths. They don't do poorly in them. Psychopaths do okay in them because they need outside pressure or outside structure, whereas creatives, they need the opposite of that. They need freedom so that they can see the whole and then create for it. It's really hard to do that when you're under the control structure schedule of others. Aesop was property. He was owned by someone like the city mouse in the center of power. He couldn't write "the city is run by psychopaths who extract everything from the countryside and call it civilization." He couldn't say that because he would have been executed before the ink dried. So he wrote about mice. For 2,500 years, his warning survived every empire that tried to bury it, because here's what he was really saying. Cities are predators, disguised as progress. The feast is bait, the trap is real, and once you're in, the system is designed to make you never able to leave. When you strip away the metaphor, the pattern becomes clear. The country mouse lives simply but sovereignly, and the city mouse lives in luxury but as prey. The country mouse experiences both the seduction and danger of the extraction system. The country mouse says, "I'm not doing that." He walks away from the illusion of abundance to reclaim actual freedom, because there isn't abundance in the city in truth. It's shallow, it's minimal, and you're going to always be paying for it. The coercion is what the country mouse sees through. He was told his life wasn't good enough. We all know this because it's our lives surrounded by all the media pushing advertising. Aesop was encoding a fundamental truth. If you have peace, do not give it up. It's okay to not want what everyone else does. When we look deeper into this story, we notice something else. We notice the environments reshape our brains. The city mouse in the country was bored because his brain is racing. He's used to constant stimulation. He lives in a hyper-vigilant state where stillness feels threatening, like there's something wrong, there's something off. When he got to a place of safety, not only did he not recognize it, he didn't enjoy it, he didn't value it, he wanted to leave. That's what we call ADHD in the city mouse brain. When it encounters quiet environments, the nervous system, which is so used to being hyped up, stimulus dependent, needs input constantly. It feels disoriented and bored. The country mouse, though, he would get labeled as autism if he moved to the city because he's overwhelmed by the city chaos. He has his holistic intelligence. He maintains his pattern recognition and sensory sensitivity, and he could tie those two together. Neither are disorders. They're adaptive responses to environmental demands that have become pathologized because our cities want to control who is special and who is not. The real pathology are the urban environments that systematically disrupts our natural neurological development. It is the environments that are the pathology, creating generations whose nervous system can't function without artificial stimulation or shut down when overstimulated. It is the forcing of us to our stamina in our education systems and then reinforced by that in our cities that we see this. We are going to school to be funneled to the cities. The 2D education system creates the environment closer to a city in the classroom, and that is what the result is. You get labeled if you are not able to perform normal in an unnormal environment. When I was growing up, my great-grandparents used to say, don't go to the city. The city's where the psychopaths live, which I thought was funny at the time, but now I understand the context. The cities are where the psychopaths live because that 2D system, that pathology is what psychopaths live in. That's how their brains work. They need higher stimulation. They don't feel their bodies, so they don't care if they have to sit in a seat. Basically, they created the ideal environment where they will rise to the top and everyone else will struggle in the cities in our education system. Why would they do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, psychopaths don't do well in natural human environments. They also can't create. So when you cannot create, you need people to create for you. And essentially, they've set up a giant Ponzi scheme so they can get people to create for them. And they built an environment that they do like, and that is the cities. Psychopaths can't move out of the city. They lack the sensory intelligence. They lack access to their somatic intelligence. So they have to stay in the city because the city is the only place where they can function. Before the 1940s, everybody knew that the city was full of predators who concentrated power. It was in the countryside where people still got to live whole human lives, where they had good relationships with their families. At first, state colleges were built out in the country. They were built out far from urban centers. There were still plenty of small towns that had excellent colleges built around them because this kept them safer from the corruption. But in the 40s, after a coordinated campaign of rewriting the story of where intelligence existed, lived, and what it was, suddenly smart people lived in the cities. Suddenly the cities are education centers. Rural populations were deemed backwards. University culture deliberately concentrated to urban cities. They moved whole university systems to the cities that rewrote this history. Within one generation, everybody was convinced that the place their ancestors had warned them about was the only place worth living. Elsewhere in the world, we knew that the cities were not healthy. By the Victorian era, the symptoms of cities were undeniable. Entire populations were developing what today we see as chronic fatigue syndrome, POTS, anxiety disorders, autoimmune collapse. And what did the medical establishment do? They said, go take a holiday, go to the beach, go to the country. They knew that nature was where you could reset your nervous system, where you could find your immune health. They couldn't admit the cities were unhealthy, that they were not natural, that they were bad for people's health. So they recommended a rest in the country. To convince people to go to the city, they needed the creatives because the creatives are the ones who make the city interesting. The rural areas starved of any sort of real creativity, starved of anything that wasn't binary, bland, normal 1950s. They put the indie places in the city, places that drew out creative people from the suburbs and the rural areas to the cities. Cities commodified rebellion that they created by making you a scapegoat at home. The 2D system, the Prussian education system, which was the model, they did the same with the Polish children. They broke them apart from their culture, their families, and they got them to serve Prussia. While the change for the creatives was obviously the fastest with the 2D system because they turned all the creatives into the learning different or learning disabled or struggling, and they made them the scapegoats. For the rest of the group, the process was slower, was much slower. Because when I was going to school, even in the 90s, I had economics, I took a sewing class, I took a shop class. We still had some of those classes. But they replaced those classes with screen-based learning, college or bust pressure. In the 90s, nobody wanted to get their 2-year community college degree because that meant you had to stay home. My teachers were very clear on who should go to college and who shouldn't. If you went to college, it meant you were leaving. You were probably never going to come back to the town I grew up in. If you stayed, it meant you went to community college. And they acted like that was less than, but You were the one that was staying. That seemed like a really bad way of dealing with it, but that was how it worked. If you ever watched the movie Grease, they used to work on cars in high school. I know schools in Mexico who teach the 4-year degree with the 2-year degree because it embodies it. Not here in the States. Heck no, we do not embody anything. We do everything we can to do the opposite of embodying it because God forbid anybody actually truly knows something deeply. It's all shallow surface because that way you have fewer choices. You're locked into whatever you go into and slot in the system. College system is 2D and comes with debt attached to it. That's the reason they funnel you into that. The creatives, they're the only ones who can still make things. We get funneled into tech. Tech meant we weren't getting to be the typical creative, but if we lived in the city, then we could hang around with creatives. I did move to cities because of that, but ultimately, I couldn't stay in cities. They're breaking me. Physically, 2D school was torture, and the way I felt living in cities was torture. With each generation, school is becoming more restrictive, more controlling. There's less creative outlets, and they just keep handing out more labels instead of fixing education. I know the educators are not necessarily at fault for this. It's the administrators, but let's face it, our education system is one of the worst in the world, and we pay the most per student. Obviously, it's not educating. It's just conditioning. Children are shooting it up. That should be an indicator, but we've all been conditioned in it to not question authority. Most have lost our top-down thinking. Without our top-down thinking, we can't even see across domains and connect things together. I still have my top-down thinking. For that, I was told as a kid, what is wrong with you? Why are you like this? Who do you think you are? Like, I needed to know my class level. I was aware of my class level, but they said this because I could see across boundaries. Most importantly, the 2D system separated students from their ability to know what they actually wanted. The 2D replaced internal guidance and your whole intelligence coming together with external pressure to break you to perform for the outside, keeping you always focused on the outside. This is how empires assimilate periphery. Cities are not where we create, they're where they extract creation. They produce nothing and consume everything. The feast in the City Mouse's story wasn't about cheese, it was about the surplus extracted from the countryside. In cities, they're pulling in the very best of the countryside so the countryside doesn't get their own best. Cities concentrate wealth and power until the Ponzi schemes collapse. They bring people in the bottom and say, you get to move up. If you are good enough and smart enough and special enough, you get to move up. But most people never do. Most never have a chance. The infrastructure isn't built for flow and continuity. It's built for dependence and oppression. When the extraction stops, cities become death traps. The people are held there by artificial scarcity, rising costs, and the fact that they've been educated out of knowing how to create. The cities are the least safe place, masquerading as the only safe place for outliers. Most creatives lose everything there. The bodies of creatives need authenticity. They can't live in the fake. This is our body's intelligence trying to protect us. When we live in our full pattern recognition, where there's space for us to breathe and think and be, we can see what's coming and get in front of it. The country mouse knew what he had to do. It was very clear. He knew quickly because his body said, you don't need this. This will kill you. This is not good for you. They tell us our whole lives we do not know ourselves. We cannot trust ourselves. We do not know what is best for us. How can that be? It can be because most people have lost that ability. Most people have been stripped of their full somatic intelligence. I only recently found out that I have my full somatic intelligence. I only recently found out that other people don't even know what they want or what's good for them. And that was astonishing for me to figure out that's what the difference between multidimensional intelligence was. I still have my full somatic intelligence. It is clear about what's going on, and yet we pathologize all of that because this system is about extracting that away. The problem is when you have it, you can create. And so the system is destroying those who can create while also needing them more than ever. They don't even know what they want. It's just about control because that's how it works. When you're 2D, you can't see the whole picture. You become myopic in your focus, and you only know how to control. So the more things get worse, the more they control, and the less they can see on how to cultivate or help anyone. Creatives know exactly what we need. We know this because if we do not know ourselves, we cannot create. We have to know our whole world. We have to know ourselves inside and out in order to create. The story reveals there was never a choice to make. 2D systems, 2D cities are places of death, dissection, and destruction. They're not creating, they're dissecting. They're just taking things that were once alive and breaking them up and calling them new things. In order to make a city, they had to scapegoat the creatives in their own families and their own cities or towns and villages to get them to move to the bigger cities. And when they got there, all they were offered was each other, which is what they should have gotten in their hometowns. Now the cities are going to collapse. The services are going to falter. Supply chains are going to break. Institutions are already losing credibility. The crime rates are going to rise. The middle class and the wealthy class always leave first. A lot of wealthy have extra homes. They can go in and out as they need to. With COVID, we had a dry run of people who could leave. It's going to continue to happen as we have a rapid decline. This is a tipping point, essentially, of the cities, because the cities aren't real. They're not true creative places. You have to have everything shipped in. And so as soon as things break down, they break down. And everyone who can leaves. What happens when they leave, though, is emergency services get shut off. Hospitals become non-functional. Gangs of militia form and take over micro areas. Mass evacuations can happen. They become survival zones in urban ghost areas. Those who stay behind are usually old and poor or very young. People are scavenging. Buildings get abandoned. They really look like wastelands. They're really going to look like what the movies say. The city becomes uninhabitable once they have no clean water. It gets uncontrolled disease. Nobody really wants to be in the cities. And I'm saying this because I know young people moving into the cities right now. Collapse is a horrifying thing, but the creatives are ones who can always leave. We built it. We made most of the things that are interesting there. So wherever we go, we can do that again. We don't really need much. We just need other people who are like us, other people who have high compassionate empathy, who use that to create, because our empathy is what brings our two intelligence together, our big picture and our small, our head and our body, our cognitive and our somatic, to make creative intelligence. We have already seen examples of city collapse in Katrina, COVID, Detroit's economic collapse, and then Rome, which is where this story came from. If we can get away and create our own places in the country, we can make a place where we're not persecuted, where we're not seen as less than, where we're not being destroyed because we are able to learn through our whole intelligence. This is a very old story with a deep meaning. Even though it's one of the shortest stories out there, we have to be conscious of these old stories. They have a lot of value for us because we're going into an era where our system doesn't have anything that they can give us because they haven't kept that information. They don't tell you that things go wrong in 2D systems. They rolled this 2D system around the whole globe and it crashed everywhere, and it will crash here. These ancient stories are here for reference. They aren't just meant for children. They're meant to help everyone maintain their holistic intelligence and their creativity and understand the value of them for all times. Creatives do not struggle as profoundly as other people. When they say the meek inherit the earth, it was translated from the sensitive. But the sensitive and the creative are one and the same, because the sensitives are the one who keep multidimensional intelligence. They keep the ability to maintain the connection between their intelligences. We're all going to have to create now. We will not have the same level of resources that we've had because ecology's crashing. There's not going to be an abundance like there was. We had a false scarcity where some had abundance, but now it's going to be no one has abundance. And that's okay, because creating gets through that. Creating allows us to get through that. Creating allows us to move past that. Creating allows us to figure out how to make things without needing the resources that we may have used in the past. Creatives are good at taking small and making more, making big. This is what we do that the rest of the system didn't. Yes, we can do the dissecting and seeing the big picture. We're fine at that too, but we're really meant to create. That's how all of the things they said that we were disabled at truly came down to the fact that we weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing, which is creating. So scarcity is not as scary for the creatives. This is how we've been able to stay at the bottom of the hierarchy, the least respected, the least valued for 100 years here and 12,000 years in other cultures. So there is a little silver creative lining around collapse. Thank you for listening. I hope this was valuable. Take care.
The views, information, and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent Gifted ND Incorporated, Lillian Skinner, or the podcast. This podcast, Lillian Skinner, and Gifted ND Incorporated are not responsible and do not verify the accuracy of the information contained in this podcast series. The primary purpose of this podcast is to inform and educate. The podcast is only available for private, non-commercial use. Any other use of the information contained within this podcast must be done with express written approval and knowledge of Lillian Skinner. You may not edit, modify, or redistribute any part of this podcast. The developer assumes no liability for this podcast or its use on any other podcast or other media.